Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Counterfactual Gaming, the gaming channel where if there's something historical, we don't do it. Now, before I get started with this test, I want to invite everyone to go ahead and like and sub if they enjoy the content that they're seeing here. And if you have any questions about what's going on in Hearts of Iron or anything else, go ahead and leave a comment down below, and I'll be sure to get back to you. Now, today I'm losing against the Soviet Union during Barbarossa because we're not really testing any sort of build as such, and we're not actually fighting Barbarossa. Today we want to answer a simple question, and that question is whether or not in a CIC build or an MIC build will generate more overall military equipment by June of 1941 for Germany. Now, why would we want to do a test like this? For a couple of reasons. One, I've actually done this test 3 years ago. I did it on the Paradox Forum, where I showed the differences in military production between a Germany that builds CIC for 24 months versus a Germany that builds only MIC from day one. And I also want to settle some questions people have asked me over the past 2 years about the relative merits of building MIC versus building CIC. And I also just wanted to create a video to act as a reference when someone asks me this question in the future. I can just be like, here's my test. But before I talk about how I'm going to run this test, I want to make something clear. This is not a test on creating a meta build. You can't see it, but there's air quotes. I'm doing air quotes in front of the microphone. But it's also not a test to say which one is a better way of doing things. All I want to determine is, will you have more military equipment on hand by June of 1941 if you build MIC versus CIC? That's all I want to answer. How you interpret that data, that's a different question. Now, I know some people will probably say, oh, I already know the answer to this, but it's not just a question of which has more military equipment by June of 1941. It is also a question of how much more equipment you would have by 1941 and what factory counts look like. So if we're going to count military equipment, how should we do that? Well, if you were playing a normal game, you're producing all kinds of stuff. You're going to be producing planes, you're going to be producing tanks, infantry kits, all kinds of stuff. But the problem with that is the game doesn't ever track what you produce. It only tracks what you have in stockpile at the moment and what you're producing. So as you can see here, I am producing stuff, but I don't have a way of telling the game, hey, keep track of what I've produced. It can only keep track of what I have in stockpile. So in order to actually be able to keep track of things in the stockpile, I need some way of tracking something I can produce that I'm not going to find in stockpiles from capitulations, something that Germany doesn't start with, and something that I have the technology to build right out of the gate. And the answer to that is armored cars. That's right. We are going to measure military output in armored cars. And we're going to be doing this for a couple of reasons. One, Germany starts with armored cars. Two, you don't ever really capture that many armored cars from capitulating other countries, and even if you did, they're very easy to see in the stockpile view. You can just delete them. Armored cars only cost steel, and armored cars are relatively inexpensive. They cost 4 production costs apiece. Now, I know someone's immediately saying, but wait a second, Counterfactual. Germany has to import stuff and has to make synthetic plants to do things like planes and artillery and tanks and all that. And yes, you're 100% right. I'm not measuring in this test how much you can import or the impact of imports on German production. I'm only wanting to measure just what the factories can output. So I need something that doesn't require imports. Germany has plenty of steel, and as I'm going to explain in a second, we'll be able to forego any imports, so I could just measure what factories are doing. Now, you could design a tank, like I could go over here and do like an interwar light tank and do something fancy with that. But I find that the armored cars costing 2 steel sort of meets my needs and my requirements, and I don't have to have any XP or tech to do anything like that. Now, in order for this test to make sense, though, we are also going to have a set PP and NF order in order for the test to be sensible. And so, for the purposes of this test, Germany is going to do the free trade Goebbels war economy path for PP expenditure. I'm not doing Bormann. I'm not doing Spanish Civil War support from attachés. I'm just going to do first 150 PP on free trade, and then we do Goebbels, and then we go straight to war economy. Why am I doing that? Well, I want to push the factories as hard as I can, so that means using free trade. Because as you know, if we go look at free trade has the most benefits to construction speed and a factory output. Later on, when Germany starts to run short of steel in roughly 38 for both paths and both builds, Germany will downshift to export focus so that Germany doesn't have to do any imports. And yes, during the MIC build, Germany will downshift to export focus sooner because they're going to need the steel sooner. I also want to do free trade as the first PP because a lot of folks in multiplayer games like to do that, and they can do that in a multiplayer environment because they can set up trades and swap CIC back and forth. So from an MP perspective, it makes sense to do that. In terms of NFs, Germany is going to focus on Rhineland, then go through like autarky, 4-year plan, all that stuff. I intend to do, for both builds, Anschluss in 37, later in 37, then we push right into claims on Memel, and then the Sudeten chain throughout 38. For the CIC test, we are going to do 24 months of straight CIC building, and then we will swap over to MIC production. For the MIC side, of course, we are going to only have MIC, so there won't be any swapping over. I intend to look at data points in 2 critical points in time. I'm going to look at how much military equipment in terms of armored cars has been produced by Danzig, and I'm going to look at how much has been produced by June of 41. I'm going to do no collaborations, and I'm going to form Vichy. The reason I'm going to do that, mainly it's because I need to do something consistent, and as I found out when I ran this test several times, is that if I try to do collabs, there's a chance that sometimes I'll get the good version of collab, and sometimes I'll just get the mediocre collab, but it's RNG based, and it screws up the test if you got one test got good collabs and the other test got the mediocre collabs. I'm also going to cheat in through the console enough infantry kits to meet the requirements for Anschluss and the Sudeten chain, and also so I can send some troops to the Spanish Civil War. I am also, unlike what you see here, where I'm steadily losing ground to the Soviet Union, when I initiate the war, I'm going to leave the AI turned on, but I'm going to delete the armies of France, Britain, Yugoslavia, Greece, Denmark, and Norway, so that I can just quickly occupy them with minimal fighting. That's not because I'm trying to test the power of this build, but that's because I want to occupy those countries in roughly the same amount of time, so that both builds have the same like occupied focuses. I had originally thought of just consoling in annexations, but that caused some other issues that I don't have time to talk about. But just trust me, it's better to do the occupations. Oh, and one other thing, I will of course, as you're going to see here, I'm going to do the integrate war economies on Romania and Hungary once I get them in the Axis, so that I get those juicy factories as well. It is June of 39, and I am at the point of Danzig for my CIC test. I spent 2 years building CIC, and then I've just been building MIC the whole time. If we go and look at the tab, the construction tab, we can see that I have 139 military factories, and they have built a total of 66,392 armored cars since game start. Now, I've picked June for Danzig because that's actually when I usually initiate Danzig. If you're more historically minded and you really want to wait till the closer to the historical date of Danzig, you'd have slightly different numbers. But this is when I would normally attack, and I normally initiate Danzig as Germany, even on a historical run-through in June of 39 for like a whole list of reasons I don't have time to get into right now. I think it's just a better time to attack, especially if you're going to go right into, you defeat Poland, while you're defeating Poland, you run, of course, around the Maginot. By the time Poland is defeated, around the Maginot is probably almost done. You shift your forces west, you wipe out Benelux and France, while you run the Westbrung focus. Then once that's done, you've already occupied Benelux and France, and you can take out Denmark and Norway. That's what I'll be doing this game. That's what I usually do when I play Germany. All right, here is the MIC build. The MIC build has 106,923 armored cars by 15 June, and it's using 149 MIC. So it's got the MIC build by June of 39 has the lead in number of military factories and the lead in terms of military production. And that is a significant difference in military production. It really is. I'm not talking about raw numbers here, but I want you to consider what this looks like in percentage terms. Now, doing back-of-the-envelope calculations using the calculator app on my computer tells me that that's a 61% increase in military equipment by going the MIC route than going the CIC route. So whether you're making armored cars or planes or ships or infantry kits or artillery, going this route generates 61% more military equipment. Now, hold on. I know folks are probably saying right now that I got to build synthetic plants, I got to import tungsten, I got to do all these things. And like, yes, I know you have to do all those things. And yes, I know you can't import things without adequate CIC. I do understand that. And I also know that when you're playing single player, the AI is a terrible trade partner, which means you're going to end up probably buying a whole bunch of stuff from your allies, especially Romania, and they're not going to be buying any steel from Germany, even though Germany would be the logical choice to buy steel from. I do understand all that. But what I'm saying is, just in terms of raw factory output, going the MIC route by June of 39 yields significantly more military equipment, around 61%. This is also the point where I have to tell everyone that, yes, I also understand that there are things you might want to produce that you cannot produce in 1936. Certain kinds of aircraft, certain kinds of armor, and you have to wait till research is done to put those things into production. I do understand that. So you might not get as much equipment of the kind as you want from a pure MIC standpoint. But I'm pretty sure that most players could probably use just some basic extra infantry kits and could probably use plenty of tier 1 AA guns. Even if you're going to do tier 2 AA guns later, just having a bunch of tier 1 AA guns laying around probably isn't a bad thing. Also, trucks and trains might be a consideration for some players. Like, there's other things you can produce. But yes, if you're only caring about 1940 aircraft, 1938, 1940 tanks, then the advantage in MIC output by Danzig does not look as impressive to you. This is why I'm doing this test, because I want you to be able to see the numbers so you can make real decisions. Let's see what it looks like in June of 41. All right, so this is the CIC build in June of 41. The CIC build has 320,450 armored cars produced as of this date, with 335 military factories in place. If we look here at the MIC build, we see that we have 368,016 armored cars built using a grand total of 343 military factories. All right, so that seems to be a clear indication that even by June of 41, you would still have more military equipment on hand if you go the pure MIC route, as opposed to building CIC for 2 years. And this backs up what a lot of folks in multiplayer games talk about, how even if you're doing a historical multiplayer game, Germany really needs to build almost exclusively MIC or the required synthetic plants for rubber, because every CIC you build is one less MIC producing the required equipment. But these numbers do hide a couple of what I consider to be less than obvious implications. First of all, earlier I pointed out that the difference in military equipment by Danzig between MIC and CIC was around a 37% difference. So you got 37% more equipment by Danzig going the MIC route than the CIC route. But if we take a look at, if we go to the calculator for a second, we're going to see something a little different here. First of all, has produced 47,566 more armored cars by June of 41 than the CIC build. But by June of 41, that only represents a 14% increase in total overall equipment. The absolute number of armored cars is slightly higher than it was at Danzig, because at Danzig we had roughly 40,000. So you're like, well, okay, we now have 47,000 more armored cars, but the percentage difference is much smaller. And so what that tells me is that, it tells me a couple of things. One, the MIC build is still staying ahead of the CIC build, but the MIC factory counts are moving in favor of CIC by this point, and the advantage the MIC build has over the CIC build is much, much smaller by June of 41. There's also something else you can't see. It would be hard for me to show it to you without like doing a whole bunch of stuff on screens. But the CIC build, let's go take a look at that for a second. Barbarossa CIC. But by Barbarossa, the CIC build is almost out of factory slots. We're still building stuff. As you can see, we've got buildings still happening in a couple of places, but we're running out of slots by now. You can cure that by not forming Vichy. You can cure that by occupying maybe Bulgaria. You can cure that by building more synthetic plants. And why do I say build more synthetic plants? Well, synthetic plants cost 14,500, whereas factories like CIC only cost 10,000, or military factories only cost 7,200. So if you built like 10 synthetic plants, those are going to take up factory slots, but they're going to cut down on the number of overall factories you have, because each synthetic plant costs far more to build than a factory does, either kind of factory. But it also means that Germany, with a CIC build, really needs to occupy more land in order to fulfill the full promise of a CIC build, which means as you go through Barbarossa, you get out here, right out here, you need those factory slots in order to really maximize the potential of a CIC build. Put another way, there is no point in Germany building CIC unless you fully intend to have the Soviets defeated in enough time to make full use of those factory slots. I want to emphasize, again, in case anyone is confused, that if you think your build already has enough infantry kits, support equipment, AA guns, artillery, basic staples for Germany, and what you really are starving for are tanks and aircraft, then an MIC build, while helpful, may not solve all your problems simply because you can't start building some of those things at game start. You have to wait until you get technologies in place. And depending on when you get those technologies in place will depend on when you want to actually have MIC. Now, of course, nothing stops you from, say, building a whole bunch of MIC and throwing those factories on infantry kits or support kits or whatever. When you pick up, say, the 38 tank chassis, and then you just move a chunk of factories over, accept the fact that you're going to lose some of that production, move them over and begin spamming that. You can certainly do that. But what I'm telling you is pure MIC will certainly net you more overall production, but if you think that you're not getting the kind of productions that you really want in your game, maybe do a hybrid build where you say, okay, I'm going to build CIC until I research Tech X, then I start building MIC. So maybe you build 6 months of CIC or a year of CIC. I also want to point out one other little thing. Because I pushed Germany's economy as hard as I could by adopting free trade until I ran out of steel, by pushing Goebbels and war economy to get war economy as early as I could, you would have a hard time pushing out any more armored cars than I have in these builds, simply because all I've done is focus on the economy. And I did that not because I'm bad at testing the game, but because I want to highlight these differences as far as I can. It puts them into relief much more. In a real game, you're going to be importing some oil from Romania. In a real game, you're going to be importing some tungsten from Portugal. In a real game, Germany is certainly going to be building some synthetic plants. And of course, in a real game, you're going to slap collabs on at least Poland and France, if not other countries. All of those things are going to chew up your factory count and reduce your overall output. And if you don't take free trade at the opening like I did, and I know a lot of players in the multiplayer community, free trade is just, for Germany is just like standard. Free trade for Germany in single player can be really hard to sustain without, pulling your hair out and swearing a lot. That if you instead stay on limited exports or export focus and don't go all the way to free trade, that will also slow down your economic expansion as Germany, regardless of which focus that you're taking. And a comparison between CIC and MIC under all of those conditions will shrink the difference between the two a bit. There's also something else I didn't do. I really should remind everyone of this. I didn't build any infrastructure at all. The only infrastructure I got literally came from the Reichsautobahn focus. That is it. I did not build any infrastructure anywhere. I didn't build any other infrastructure for two reasons. One, I don't consider infrastructure for Germany to be a wise investment. If you're thinking, oh, I'll build infrastructure first and then I'll build factories and it'll make the factories build faster, the payoff on that doesn't help Germany. And two, I don't have any resources that I need in Germany to utilize the infrastructure bonus for. I don't think that's super helpful for Germany. Germany does have railroads she needs to build, certainly. And if you do like an Occupy Romania thing, you're probably going to build infrastructure there. If we take a look at the resource map, you may also, if you choose to occupy Vichy completely and reject the armistice, you might build some infrastructure down there to beef up your aluminum production if you don't feel like buying from Hungary. Or if you've occupied the Soviet Union, you might pave the Soviet Union and roads to improve the resource production out here. I mean, there's a lot of tungsten to tap. But for our purposes, there's no point in building infrastructure. But if you chose to build infrastructure, what we're talking about here, we're talking about each piece of infrastructure you build costs 6,000 production cost, which is not quite the cost of a factory, but it's pretty close. So again, if you're an infrastructure kind of player, you got to take these numbers with a grain of salt because these numbers are not factoring in your desire for infrastructure. And I think that about wraps up this video. I want to thank you for taking the time to actually watch this. I hope that you actually learned something from this, as I did. I actually did not anticipate these results completely. When I did this test 3 years ago, the results were somewhat different. I'm also doing a change to the artwork related to my channel. I'm tapping into some resources to help me make better artistic decisions in terms of banners and graphics and so on. Because let's face it, folks, I don't have any visual art talent at all. But look for those changes, and if you've got any questions about what's been going on in this test, let me know down below. I am looking at maybe doing some more Hearts of Iron content soon. I was going to do a Victoria 3 video, but a bug literally ate my Russia save game and killed it. That bug has been fixed by a hotfix now, but that makes it kind of hard to do the content when the game randomly crashes on save. I also do plan to do some commentary on the new Mio system once we learn a little more about it. But until then, I want all of y'all to have a pleasant day, or at least a better day than the Germans are having now that the Soviets are invading Berlin. Y'all have a good one. I'll see you later.